At 9:30 this morning, open-source intelligence communities lit up. Newly surfaced commercial satellite images appeared to reveal the real reason behind the sudden combat posture of the USS Abraham Lincoln, an episode that had unfolded quietly 10 days earlier in the Indian Ocean, and, according to the claims, came dangerously close to triggering a massive regional conflict. The incident reportedly began at 4:15 on January 20th near the Gulf of Oman. A container ship sailing under the Marshall Islands flag, while broadcasting spoofed Singapore AIS data, was moving in silence toward the Strait of Hormuz. Inside cargo hold number 4 were said to be 20 tons of next-generation titanium carbon gyroscopes, a shipment allegedly critical for helping Iran restore its ballistic missile production capability after last year's setback in Natanz. Above the vessel, a USMQ-4C Triton reconnaissance drone had the ship under watch when its control feed suddenly turned white. According to the story, Iran had activated a portable electronic warfare system supplied by Russia, attempting to blind American surveillance and slip into disputed waters unnoticed. But the escape did not go as planned. Out of the darkness, the destroyer USS Spruance suddenly broke radio silence and moved to block the ship's path. Orders to stop were followed by warning fire from M2 Browning .50 caliber tracers ripping across the water just off the bow. Under extreme pressure, the ship's captain reportedly turned hard and reduced speed to keep the bridge from being torn apart. That moment of confusion was exactly what the boarding team needed. While the crew focused on the U.S. warship, 2 stealth RHIBs carrying SEAL Team 6 closed in undetected. Grappling hooks went up, the rail was cleared in 27 seconds, and the boarding looked flawless. But when one operator reached for the lock on cargo hold number 4, no one realized that behind the steel door was not simply a shipment of components, but a tightly guarded secret waiting in the dark. At 4:22, the team began cutting through the lock with a thermal lance. The 4,000-degree flame sliced through the metal with ease, and the hatch finally gave way. But the instant the opening appeared, the point man's handheld thermal imager flashed a red warning. The CIA had expected silent cargo. Instead, the screen showed 8 heat signatures already moving into ambush positions. These were not ordinary merchant sailors. They were dressed in full tactical gear, armed with suppressed MP-5SD submachine guns, and 2 were reportedly carrying man-portable air defense systems. The force was identified as a special operations element of the Quds force, positioned inside the hold to protect the shipment. Hidden behind cargo stacks, they had their weapons trained directly on the hatch. If the SEALs dropped in the usual way, they would be met immediately at point-blank range. The team leader reacted fast. He ordered 2 stun grenades thrown with precision through a narrow ventilation shaft beside the compartment. The blast thundered through the enclosed space, creating a crushing wave of sound that shook the deck above. For roughly 4 seconds, the armed team below was completely disoriented. That tiny window was all the SEALs needed. 4 operators fast roped into the compartment and, using close-quarters tactics, subdued all 8 targets in just 17 seconds. 2 who appeared ready to trigger explosive vests were stopped instantly. The remaining 6 were restrained. Then came the real surprise. When the container was opened, it was empty. The entire operation shifted in an instant. Iran had not simply hidden the cargo, it had buried it beneath a false floor. The story claims the crew had cut into the ship's deck, concealed the 20 tons of components below, then sealed the space under an 8-centimeter steel plate painted to match the surrounding structure. The visible container above was only a decoy. Now, the mission had changed from seizure to demolition. Cutting through 8 centimeters of structural steel with a thermal tool would take at least 8 minutes. In the heat, with almost no airflow, that process could turn the compartment into a furnace. Oxygen would drop fast, flammable material could ignite, and the team could find itself trapped by the environment even before outside forces reached them. On deck, events were already spiraling. The ship's captain decided to make a break for it. Instead of complying with orders from the USS Spruance, he pushed the engines to maximum. The 50,000-ton vessel shuddered, poured thick black smoke from its stack, and accelerated to 25 knots, weaving in violent zigzags while repeatedly cutting across the bow of the American destroyer at barely 300 meters. Spruance was forced into emergency maneuvers to avoid a collision. That was only the beginning. The moment the U.S. ship adjusted course, 12 PACAP 3-class fast attack craft reportedly surged out from behind nearby civilian fishing boats and raced toward the American formation. They launched flares and dispersed chaff, disrupting radar returns and cluttering the battle space. The CIWS defense system came online, but American gunners could not fire freely because the fast boats were mixed in with civilian vessels, creating a chaotic shield that automated defenses could not safely separate. With that cover in place, the Iranian boats formed a moving ring around the cargo vessel, cutting off the SEALs inside. The boarding team was now trapped deep inside a fleeing steel giant, while armed escorts circled outside like a pack closing around prey. Then came an even bigger threat. At 4:35 on Keshem Island, 4 C-802 anti-ship missile launchers were reportedly raised, while 8 Shahed 136 one-way attack drones headed toward the U.S. force. Inside the hold, the SEAL team could hear the distinct whine of drone engines overhead. 8 minutes to cut through the deck and recover evidence was no longer a realistic option. The commander switched to Plan B, activate the EMP device. It was a dangerous move. Electromagnetic disruption combined with malware was a blunt force option, effective only if they could reach the vessel's critical data and power lines beneath the floor. After a frantic search, the technical specialist located the relevant conduit below the engine section. He dropped to the oily floor and crawled into a cramped, dark compartment. There was no easy access point, only a thick steel conduit that had to be opened by hand with a miniature saw, in a space so tight he could barely move his fingers. And then the ship lurched. Realizing pursuit was closing in, and believing coastal missiles were about to engage, the captain threw the vessel into a sharp 90-degree turn, steering towards Sri Lankan territorial waters. The calculation was simple. If the Americans fired or sank the ship there, Washington could face a severe diplomatic crisis. The maneuver rolled the vessel 18 degrees. The SEALs lost their footing. The specialist was nearly pinned in the engine compartment as a heavy backup engine block slid past, missing his legs by inches. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the sheer pressure of tapping into the wiring while the floor pitched beneath him. One mistake, one short circuit, and he could have destroyed both himself and the device in his hands. Outside, the USS Spruance was forced into evasive action to break radar lock from an incoming Noor missile. It could no longer provide meaningful support to the boarding team. Time was running out, and the ship was nearing a line no one wanted crossed. Then, just as the situation reached its breaking point, help arrived. An EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft from the USS Abraham Lincoln entered the area and immediately activated its ALQ-99 jamming system, targeting Iranian command frequencies. In an instant, the cargo ship's captain was cut off, effectively blind, deaf, and isolated from shore-based coordination. Iranian air defenses on Keshem Island responded. A Pantsir system locked onto the Growler. Instead of retreating, the aircraft launched 4 MALD-J decoy drones at high speed, imitating the radar signature of an incoming FA-18 strike package. The deception worked. The air defense batteries opened fire on false targets, pulling attention away from the real aircraft. Inside the swaying cargo hold, the SEAL team managed to connect a USB drive loaded with malware into the ship's systems. But at that exact moment, their worst concern became reality. The captain, having lost contact with the Quds unit below and suspecting the ship had been boarded, personally led 6 remaining sailors armed with AK Patton rifles to the main cargo hold door. The door burst open, flashlights cut through the darkness and stopped on the SEAL team gathered around the device. The advantage of surprise had vanished. 4 against 6 inside a slick, confined space measuring just 4 by 4 meters. And over the radio came another warning. Missile inbound, impact in 90 seconds. Iran had decided to fire at the last known coordinates, even at the risk of destroying its own ship, just to stop the operation. Cornered and staring down rifle muzzles, the SEALs reacted with remarkable composure. As the Iranian side opened fire in panic, 2 lead operators dropped low and answered with precise shots from suppressed Glock 19 pistols fitted with infrared laser sights. The first 2 attackers went down almost instantly. The remaining 4 hesitated under the speed of the counterattack. The captain tried to reach for a grenade, but a 9mm round struck his shoulder, knocking it from his hand before it could be activated. One of the operators surged forward, kicked the weapon aside, and ended the threat immediately. The entire exchange lasted just 27 seconds. Spent casings rolled across the deck. Groans filled the hold, but there was no time to process any of it. Through their headsets came the command from Spruance. Vampire, Vampire, missile inbound at Mach 0.9, impact in 60 seconds. There was only one option left. The team leader ordered a linear cutting charge placed on the scupper hatch along the side of the hold. A deep blast echoed through the vessel, and the thick steel panel was blown clear into the sea. Wind and seawater roared through the opening. The order came instantly. Jump! Jump! Now! One by one, the operators clipped in, launched themselves out of the ship, and dropped 15 meters into the freezing black water below, while the cargo vessel raced ahead at 25 knots. Their stealth RHIBs matched speed in pursuit, pulling each man from the sea in a recovery that bordered on the impossible. The moment the last boat cleared the ship's shadow, defensive countermeasures were launched from the American side. A Nulka active missile decoy shot into the air, broadcasting a powerful electromagnetic signal that seduced the incoming Nor missile away from its target. The missile veered, tracked the decoy, and detonated roughly 400 meters off the U.S. ship. The blast shook the sea, but the fleet and the boarding team survived. The next day, January 21st, the cargo ship reached Bandar Abbas to what was described as quiet celebration from the Iranian military. But when specialists connected the recovered components to their diagnostic systems, the screen showed only one result: fatal error, firmware corrupted. According to the narrative, the combination of malware delivered by USB and electromagnetic disruption had worked perfectly. And just as painful for Tehran, there was no clean evidence to publicly accuse Washington. Acknowledging the loss of the Quds personnel would also mean admitting to violating the arms embargo, so silence became the only option. That silence, however, opened the door for psychological pressure. The leak that later appeared across OSINT forums, surfacing just as the USS Abraham Lincoln moved into the region, was interpreted as a message from the Pentagon. We see everything, and we can reach you whenever we choose. Iran answered by sending its Fateh and Ghadir submarine fleets out from base, while Allied armed groups declared readiness for a full-scale confrontation. The Gulf now stands on a knife's edge, and everything may have started with that 27-second raid aboard a ghost ship in the dark.